I warned you, Mike. I said you're going to get some tough questions,
Yeah.
but that's why we're here, right? So
That's fine.
that's why we're here. Should we get started, Elaine?
Yeah, I think so. I'll keep an eye on people coming in.
What we are untangling, Jim?
That's a great question.
Are we recording?
We are.
Okay, great. So Jobs to be done is a complete innovation framework, but it begins with qualitative inquiry, right? One of the things that Jobs to be done does is it gets us in to interact with our markets to understand those unmet needs. But as I think we're going to see today with our guest, Mike Boysen, that there might be ways to accelerate that part of the qualitative inquiry. And we're going to talk about that. Personally, I'm a big fan of qualitative inquiry because I like getting out and talking to people because you always uncover things that you wouldn't have assumed otherwise. So it'll be interesting where this conversation goes today. My name is Jim Callback. I'm the co-founder of the Jobs to be Done Toolkit and the author of the Jobs to be Done Playbook, along with Elaine. Hi, Elaine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine. I'm also one of the co-founders of the Jobs to be Done Toolkit. And I will just go over, kind of set the stage for how today's community meeting works. It's pretty straightforward. So we'll just run through a couple of updates, and then Jim will take a moment to give you some background on Mike, and then we'll go into, Mike and Jim will have a conversation. I think Mike has a couple of slides to present, and then we'll spend about the last 30 minutes with just a Q&A. So you guys will be able to ask questions. If you could post the questions in the chat, I will put them in the queue in the mural that we're viewing right now. And then when it's time for you to ask your question, you're welcome to unmute, turn on your video, and then come up and have the conversation around the question with Jim and Mike. So if there are any questions, let me know in the chat. And, we love questions. So please share what you're thinking or participate in the conversation that way. And then the only major update we have right now is that our next Untangled is going to be on November 28th. So that's the very end of the month of November. It's on a Tuesday, as always, at 12 p.m. Eastern time. Jim and I are both on the East Coast of the US. So the 12 p.m. Eastern is when we will be rejoining. All right, Jim. Ask your questions in Zoom. Yes. We've got that chat. I think I just went over that. And now our spotlight, the fun stuff. You're on mute, Jim.
On mute. There you go. Really fortunate to have Mike on the call today. Mike, I consider Mike one of the thought leaders in the field today. Jobs to be done, and I know when I was putting together my book, he was super helpful in that, and just like a lot of the examples and the literature and the things that I were reading was inspired and influenced by you, Mike. So thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I've actually been trying to hide from people so I didn't have to do these things. So this is like I think the first one I've done.
Well, we'll get you out there. I mean, your Substack is great, though. So you're certainly not hiding on Substack. If you don't know, Mike, we can put the link in there to Mike's Substack. Just a ton of great information coming out. But, just to set the stage, why don't you give folks a little bit of background on yourself? And then how did you get into Jobs to be Done?
Oh, sure. So my background is been primarily in the technology space. I spent a couple of decades building solutions on top of CRM platforms, distributed databases platforms, integrating them across, mostly mid-market enterprises to build like business operating systems. And eventually I left there, and as the cloud became more obvious it was going to take over, I kind of left there and went to EY and started getting into more strategy work in that space. But what kind of led me down this path started before that. When I first got into technology, I realized that customer requirements seemed to change constantly. They didn't survive the duration of a project, or I was getting turnaround requests, and I couldn't understand why. It's like it looked like it was implemented properly. What's the problem? And so I was kind of in search of, what's the answer? It's kind of like the life, the universe, and everything. I was looking for the 42. And Bob Thompson from Customer Think at one point reached out and asked me to blog there. It was a long time ago, and I told him I didn't write the stuff that his people wrote. And he said, "Well, why don't you just write about your journey?" So I've been on a journey to figure out, really ultimately now I know, is what customer needs are, or how we can define them, how we can use them to create a more stable and predictable outcome. So that's kind of the short story. I ended up going to Strategian for a few years, got, trained in some of the sausage making that we don't all see as outsiders. And I think that's one of the big stumbling blocks for people, is they don't really understand. It's not about just these interviews. There's so much more to the process and there's a lot to know. So that's about the end. That's really how I kind of got there, and I can continue on. I do have a couple of slides, and it kind of dovetails into this, unless you want to jump in.
No, that's good. If that's a springboard into your slides, we can, I'll stop sharing my screen. And as Elaine said, you have a couple thoughts to share with us and what you're up to now, but thanks for the background there.
Yeah, is there a way to share a window?
I think there is. Let's see, if you click screen.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, never mind.
You can even select a portion of a window if you wanted, but
yeah, I didn't. I was afraid to hit that.
There you go.
Hit that share button. Not that I have anything to hide. So we get to the point where I during the course of what I just described, I'd gotten introduced to outcome-driven innovation, which is basically an actionable framework based on jobs theory. And I started thinking, over 10 years ago, what if we could, make a different kind of a business model leveraging this capability, as opposed to just doing consulting projects? What if people could subscribe to needs or get answers to questions, things like that. So that's always kind of been in the back of my mind, but it's been so hard to do that, because these types of engagements or studies are costly and time consuming. So it just didn't make a lot of sense. So as we as time moved forward, especially over the last year, and everything accelerated, some of that thinking has changed. So I'm not the only one that was thinking about that. McKinsey 10 years ago wrote this piece on disrupting the consulting industry. And this came out after I was already thinking about this type of thing. And I thought that was very interesting. I don't know that they got it completely right as to what it would look like. But they were thinking about it, because I think, as I'll talk about in a moment, a lot of the firms out there, and I've worked for a couple of them, are under constant price pressure because for some reasons I'll get into in a second. But what we've all done, the consulting firms, people are always focusing on these high-end clients, and Clay Christensen talked about them as high profit margin customers. And basically, we're making all the right decisions by pursuing them. The problem is that disruption comes from below, and we're not paying attention to it. And my former boss, Tony Ulwick, kind of touched on this as well. He called them lead users. When you focus on lead users who are essentially, their needs would overserve everybody else, you tend to, leave the rest of the market kind of without a solution. So what I've noticed is that having been involved in many pursuits at large consulting firms, is that we're going through like procurement departments and legal departments, and they're always trying to put downward pressure on the price. All right, can you do it cheaper? Can you do it faster? And to me, I started to realize that they don't perceive what we're doing as having any value. I mean, what we're doing in these responses are presenting pretty PowerPoint decks and getting the most theatrical performer up on stage, And, so there, everybody's doing that. So there's probably no perceived differentiation between one firm and another firm. So, this is a consulting focus. I apologize if you're not in consulting, but that's what kind of got me going down this path. So I was like, well, if we're facing downward pressure and no differentiation, if we solve that problem, then we should be addressing the lower end of the market as well. So if you look at, and you can forget some of these headlines because I didn't carve them out, but this little sliver is essentially who we're addressing as strategy consulting firms. That part of the market is very, very small. Maybe the Fortune 1000 and up, and maybe down a little below that occasionally. But the rest of the market's basically underserved. They're not served at all. They're not consuming consulting engagements. So I've always been trying to figure out how can I bring the cost down and the time, down so that we can actually develop a product that would serve the rest of the market. It won't be a consulting engagement. It'll probably be, can I a point of view or research, answering questions to their questions about competing for growth, things like that. And this just to take this a little bit in a different direction. This is, if any of you are familiar with Simon Wardley, this is basically a rip-off of a Wardley map. But I've got innovation and genesis along the bottom, the evolution stage to commodity, and then I've got value on the left. And so a lot of us consultants think we're over here in this innovation area. But the market perceives us as having a low value, and they're actually pushing us into this commodity stage. They're treating us like we're a commodity by putting all this downward pressure on price. And what we really need to do is we need to find a way to get into that higher value quadrant and truly be in this innovation genesis stage. So that's essentially where I think we can get if we take some of the tools that are available now and apply them correctly. And I'll show you what I've been doing in a minute, that you might find interesting. Essentially, and I'm not trying to pick on strategy in here. This is the 84 steps from Tony's Jobs to Be Done book. That's free, by the way, jobstobedonebook.com. The qualitative portion of this methodology is really the only proprietary part of it. Because even though it's public, we've written about how to do the interviews and build the model and everything. It is the proprietary piece. So the rest is data science. I mean, you can go out and hire people that will figure that out for you. But qualitative, research is a big part of this. And right now, I believe I've eliminated a lot of the cost and time involved with that. So ultimately, as a process person, if you're a process person, you're trying to get your process down where you got a trigger and a result. And that's essentially what I'm doing. I've tackled a portion of these steps. I think the next portion is going to be more in the quantitative and analysis range. But right now, this is the big deal that takes a lot of time up front. So I won't, this is kind of just all the benefits and what we could, accomplish if we change the way we think about our business model. Firm 2.0 is not necessarily a consulting firm. It's delivering something higher level, higher order, higher context than a solution. Outcome-driven innovation or any other version of Jobs to Be Done, they're all just tools inside of a solution that's been around forever, consulting. So what I'm trying to do is maybe change that a little bit. And so I think, again, I think I've accelerated a part of that so that we can move that way faster. So that was it. I just carved out a longer deck and didn't really take a lot of time to make it special for you all. But I would like to show you some things that I've been working on that you might find interesting. Okay, do you guys all see this? So,
yeah, we can see that.
Okay, cool. So for those of you who aren't outcome-driven innovation, students or experts, whatever, I know there are a couple on this call, at least one or two I've seen. basically what we do is we identify a job, we deconstruct that job into a map of steps. They're not procedures, they're basically objectives. What are we trying to accomplish at each step? And then each of those steps, and that's done so that we frame this job properly. We've got a beginning and an end, and an appropriate level of abstraction. And then for each of those steps, we develop customer success metrics, is what I call them. Strategy calls them desired outcome statements, and I'm using their format here for demonstration. But so that's the core of what we build in this model. Everything else kind of orbits around it. So if anybody's into data science, you probably know what the STAR scheme is. I always like to use that. You've got the job and the map at the beginning, at the center, and you've got all these other things as dimensional data that you can use to slice and dice it. The other thing that we do and this is all designed so that we can put together a survey. So one of the major components of the survey is also situations, call them complexity factors, and those help us understand why different groups of people are struggling differently. Related jobs, those are to help us find additional growth opportunities. If we're fulfilling this job pretty well, the other options for growth are going to be these adjacent jobs. Emotional and social jobs, that's to help us with our marketing messaging, related to the functional job. How do I want to feel or avoid feeling? How do I want to be perceived or avoid being perceived? Financial metrics, those are included only if the person that you're surveying actually makes the purchase decision. So in a B2B scenario, this may not be applicable. You'd have to do a separate survey. And I've got a few extra stuff, a few extra things in here that aren't part of a traditional like strategy type study, but they're there for a reason. And I'm still testing and playing with them. But let me dive in and show you the state of the art as far as I've been able to develop as far with regard to creating job maps and outcomes and things like that. Now, one of the things I like to do is to generate like 20 contexts, okay, that you might get you might be performing the job in, and we can get into that in a minute here. So that's why you're seeing a bunch of these are all jobs. The universal job is basically maintaining an equestrian facility. My wife's in the horse business, so I just was playing around with this one day. And so I've got a universal job, which has its set of steps, but you may not realize that for each context, like a therapeutic riding facility, a veterinary clinic, they're all going to have a different map, and they're all going to have different outcomes. And what this approach using AI has let me do is to develop all of that stuff in advance. So now we can consider all of these things when we start talking to a client or start talking to our stakeholders to make sure we are focused on the right thing. So I'll just dive into the universal one first, and then we can maybe take a look at one of the contextual ones to see how it's different. But you'll see it says high fidelity here. One of the things I'm introducing into my prompts is this ability to control the scope and the fidelity of the output. Because if you've ever seen a human practitioner's portfolio of job maps, you'll see that they're all over the place, and a lot, they could be 7 steps, they could be 30 steps. So the fidelity level is really to get us a certain range of steps between the starting point and the ending point. And in the default setting, the starting and ending point is going to be the first phase of the 8 to 9 phases of a job map, and then obviously the last phase as well as the end point. I've got controls in there to let me start it and stop it wherever I want in addition to that. So anyways, here I've got like 18 steps because it's high fidelity. So identify the maintenance needs, gather the equipment, set up workstations, prioritize tasks, blah, 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 down the line. And then for each of them, I also have success metrics. They're done in in desired outcome format here. I don't know that they're perfect, because like Tony will tell you, we don't, the perfect statement doesn't have examples, but since I'm generating these and kind of trusting AI, I always force it to generate examples. That way I can just carve them off if I don't want them, but they're there to help explain, with a little bit more clarity for somebody who's responding to a survey. But these are pretty good. I usually generate 20 of them. That way I've got coverage and I can just carve out the ones that don't make sense. And that's a fairly quick process. If you're doing it on your own, it's really fast. If you're doing it with a set of internal stakeholders, it's fairly quick to do that as well. So that I think is one of the hardest parts is the structure, but and there's a lot of rules behind it, and I'm still tweaking some of the rules on a daily basis when I spot things. But the other thing is making sure you're getting the outcomes that truly support that step within that job. So I've got mechanisms in my prompts to run it through a test fit. If anybody reads my blog, they've probably seen me talk about the test fit structure. It's in my prompt. So it's a key element of my prompt. But as far as just to give you an example, a veterinary clinic's going to have different steps. Because the universal map has nothing about sanitizing examination rooms, things like that. So the steps are different. The explanation for the step is different, and then obviously you're going to have outcomes that are aligned to that particular step. So I'll go through a couple more of these areas real quick, and then we can jump to questions if somebody wants to start giving me a hard time. Situations or complexity factors. I don't know what the state of these are today. In the strategy world, I heard that might have changed a little bit, but this is what I kind of learned was, we basically putting together a rating scale for different complexity factors or situations. So I'm outputting these through AI. I didn't format any of this. I just wrote the instruction and it punches it out just like this. So one situation might be when you're maintaining the facility, might be horse health. I have multiple sick horses. All the horses are healthy. Conditions of the stables, dilapidated, immaculate. So these are all things that when you have done your prioritization in the field and you've segmented the market based on the outcome statements. So you've got clusters or groups of people that struggle differently, described through those needs. These complexity factors will help you to potentially understand or describe that group. And I wrote a piece a number of years ago about the data-driven, what was that called, Jim? It was something about personas, and maybe it was data-driven personas, but we don't generate personas up front and then do our research. We basically define the personas from the research. So this is the type of thing that will help you explain that persona, that group, that segment that you might be focused on. Obviously, another way, and it's probably something that needs to be done on every study, is to go back to those people and those respondents in a segment and get some verbatims and talk about, probe a little bit more, because sometimes you may not have gotten the coverage you needed on these. But I think the AI is doing a great job of outputting. I can output 20, I can output 50, whatever I want to do. So that's the situation component. Context, you already saw I generated a bunch of those as well. Each context, by the way, I generated its own set of complexity factors. So they're all different as well. And you can do that in minutes. It's scary how fast this is. Related jobs, basically, this is when you're talking about a core functional job, when you're like at the market level, you're not talking about designing a solution or a journey or something like that. These tend to be interesting to look at because they may look like a step in the job, but you'll get some other ones as well. So as you begin really perfecting how you deliver within that job, these are going to be your other areas to explore. So we typically throw these into a study, rate them on importance and satisfaction, or importance and difficulty, or whatever, and then get a sense for, do we need to dive? Is this one an opportunity for us to dive into? So that's what those are for. So we basically break it down as, what do you do before you're doing this job? What are you doing? What are you also doing while you're doing the job? And what do you do after you do the job? Pretty basic stuff. Social jobs, again, that's just how do I want to be perceived? So when I'm doing this job, maintaining an equestrian facility, I want to be perceived as organized. I want to be perceived as knowledgeable. I want to, obviously the contrary is true. So you wouldn't throw all these questions in there, but so that helps to understand some of this aspect of the emotion, I guess, for lack of did I miss the emotional job? It's probably out of order. Sorry. The emotional job, I'll skip over that one, but it's basically how you want to feel when you're doing the job, or what you want to avoid feeling. Financial metrics. These are, I will tell you that this list is has the prompt that generates this has been completely revamped and refactored. The outputs are completely different and more in line with more traditional outputs. But the point of these, if you're doing a consumer study, you may want to know what are some of the cost considerations that the consumer takes into account. If you're doing a separate B2B study, you may want to survey the purchase decision maker or a committee or whoever's making the decision about what they're looking at when they decide whether or not to, they're looking beyond just the end user experience. So this is what that's for, and that will help you understand what you need to do to accommodate them. And consumption metrics. I mean, consumption chain, for those of you who don't know, are basically journeys, customer journeys. So we can use this methodology for journeys as well. And it works great. As a matter of fact, that's where I spend most of my time focused on. But when you're doing more of a core functional job, you might want to, that you're going to have a solution out there that's going to have a consumption chain. So you might want to throw some metrics in there to see where people are struggling or think they're going to struggle. This is just me being generous. I throw in an extra 150 metrics just for fun at the job level. Risks, this is more of an experiment, but it's interesting. As you move from your problem solving work to implementation, some of the other things that I'm doing are really to bridge that gap a little bit. The ideal, the root cause, that's one of those things. And I've been playing around with generating screening questions for surveys, things like that. So that's kind of it. I mean, I can put out this model. I mean, other than, the cutting and pasting it takes today for me to do this, and some of the governor limits that I hit with ChatGPT, I can really put out the basic model in an hour. So when you think about it, scheduling interviews, paying for the interviews, the time it takes to come up with a straw man that you then use within those interviews to kind of accelerate those conversations or validate them. That all takes time. It's not just how many hours of your time it takes. There's calendar time involved in, when I went to T-Mobile, one of the things that I heard right off the bat when we said that our study was going to be like 3 months, they're like, we don't do studies that are more than 2 weeks. So, calendar can be important depending on the organization you're in. So I think this is a step forward in getting us there. I know there's a lot of, especially early on, there's a lot of questions. Is this good enough or is it perfect? And I'll say this, I'm not going to debate what perfect is, because my idea of perfection is going to be different than yours. The question is whether, given the fact that we're using the jobs lens, whether it's good enough. And I think it's much better than good enough, but it's at a minimum, I think it's good enough. So I'll just say that I'm working on an academic paper with someone many of you probably would know, that will go into some of that and how it does against humans. So stay tuned for that. I don't know how long that will take, but and we're in the process of developing that today. So I'll leave it there, and we can go into questions. And
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. I just want to clarify a couple of things. Everything you just showed us was done with AI, that you did not do any user interviews to generate anything that you showed us today, correct?
I did 0 user interviews and I did 0 formatting. I mean, I literally have formatted the output the way I want it, and I just plop it where it needs to go in here. And that will be automated at some point. It's just a matter of, when you're still working on the prompts, it doesn't make a lot of sense to focus on something else.
And your ultimate goal, just to tie back to the beginning, to remind us there, is you want to disrupt the consulting business to move 3-month projects down to 2 hours, right? Not even 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, I mean, I started this whole kind of journey building capability maturity models before I was at Sapient, and it's like wherever I've been, nobody ever had those. And those are, the model itself is what I consider to be qualitative research, and a lot of consulting firms will co-create the model with the client. And I heard a story just within the last year where the client of a large bank said, "We didn't expect you to co-create this with us. We expected you to have it in your back pocket." Right. So the actual part, the assessment part using that model, is what I would consider to be the quantitative part. So yeah, I think that's I'm not going to single-handedly disrupt the consulting industry or the research industry, but I do have something planned here in the very near future that will allow all of you to help me disrupt them. So stay tuned. Sign up to my Substack to get a peek at that.
So do we need to do interviews, or could we go into a project, do the AI analysis like you did, and just take the results?
I would say that I don't think you do need to use interviews. There's enough information out there, and I've tested this in professional space sectors of industries to see just how good it can. And I haven't really run into an issue yet. I mean, there's going to be differences of opinion there, but what I would say is that you can generate these frameworks, and then instead of going out to do end user interviews to validate them and build them, which is still just a handful of people, we've got coverage here, so you can go to your internal stakeholders and make it more of a scoping workshop. What do we want to focus on? And if there is an error, we can catch it, but it's easier to fine tune it with something that's already done than it is to ask them to start from scratch and help you build it.
Right. That's actually, as you started showing some of this this work, I was thinking about, any research effort right now, pre-AI, let's just say, is I have a blank piece of paper and I need to define, my job performer, my core job, and then fill in that blank piece of paper from scratch. That's what takes 3 months. And basically what you're saying is you don't have to start with a blank piece of paper. And based on your last answer, you're saying you're 99% done, if not 100% done.
I think we're really close to being done. I kind of chuckling because a year ago, someone I was working for was talking about how it was taking them 3 months to go into a certain industry and do all this qualitative work to figure out everything. And the next morning, I provided a whole catalog of stuff for him. He's like, holy shit. So I mean, yeah, it's. I think we're getting close. I mean, there's going to be. It's up to you. I think I would field a survey with the stuff I'm doing and feel confident in the results. But everybody's going to be a little different. It's going to take some time. I think there's still, again, I'm working on this academic thing. We're going to do some testing. So, we're going to try to poke some holes in it and see, see what we come up with, but we're getting there, Jim.
Okay. And of course, if you saw our episode with Evan Shore, he's also used AI in a very consequential way, to the degree that you're talking about here. I don't see any questions in the chat, Elaine, but I'd love to have somebody raise their hand and come on and join us here in this conversation and ask a question live, because I think there are some questions out there. Mariana? Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, this was really super duper interesting. Thank you. So reading between the lines here, in effect, you can sell this whole framework to more than one customer. Right?
Well, I mean, so it depends, it depends. I mean, the more universal it is, obviously, if it's like a buyer journey, you could capture information on a bunch of contexts, and yeah, you have it in your back pocket. And at that point, it becomes not really a bespoke consulting project anymore. It's like they could just buy the answer, that's one way to look at it. But yeah, I mean, I would want to go into a prospect meeting with something in my back pocket it may not be prioritized, but it's certainly a discussion time. It's like a social object. Let's have a conversation about your problem, and let's like fine tune and figure out where you want to scope it.
Right. So the value you're adding is not so much in providing the what comes out of interviews, like the what, and it's kind
Well,
of
so yeah, so this approach, I don't know how familiar you are with ODI, but the point of the qualitative side isn't to get insights, other than to get insights as to what's the problem, how do we find the problem, define the problem space. We get our real insights by putting a survey in the field and getting data. That comes from this model. So and then if we need to go back and get verbatims and emotional stories, we would still need to go back and do that. But the thing is if we do that up front, we don't know which segment the person we interviewed would have fallen in, because they hadn't taken the survey yet, and they may not take the survey. So it's kind of, yeah, it's I'm trying to accelerate through in our approach, accelerate through that qualitative portion of putting together a model, essentially, which is really almost half the project, or at least a third of it, of the work.
yeah. Thank you. Really interesting.
And Elaine, looks like Kat had a question, and then we'll go to Thorolf
Sounds good.
after that. Kat, did you want to come on and ask Mike your question, or challenge Mike, or disagree?
Yeah, no, I'm finding it all very fascinating. I've been in the design thinking sprint workshop innovation lab space for about 15 years for some of the large automakers. So what you just said most recently kind of changed my initial question, which I thought was very interesting. So when you're approaching a project with either your internal clients, or if you're approaching projects with the client as their external consultant, this approach of being able to use the AI and this model and structure you've created to almost just buy the answer, like punch in whatever you guys have been struggling with, and I'll spit out an answer on the other side. It sounds like that could be like maybe one package, but then where my, workshop head is going is, what did I write here? Like there's some initial like guiding the client through some structured steps and activities to align on the scope, and what is this problem that you're facing. What is all of the research your groups have done that they think is so great and so insightful that they're worried if it's not factored in, the end result might not be as ideal of what they're thinking. And then there's another step of getting into some core concept solutions based on everything that you've been able to help them factor in, which it sounds like your model would be spitting out some visuals and some great lists of some key things to factor in. And then there's lastly that decision piece where you've got the right people in the room that count the most, that are going to write checks or be a part of like championing something forward, where you've helped them land on decisions and the most tactical steps that they're going to take. And what does that look like in a project plan view? So I guess it's like, they're still going to want to see some of that. Like they're going to love seeing some of this stuff spit out in this incredible, and I don't know, I'm saying spit in a very fond and endearing way, but like, I'm just kind of curious how this would fold into kind of what you're describing.
Yeah. So I when I was at T-Mobile, I worked kind of next door to a design thinking team. We all reported to the same person. And we had to kind of figure out how we would work together. And we didn't get very far because I left, and that organization was a little chaotic. But the way we kind of landed was this work. Obviously, this qualitative piece accelerates a lot of things because it lets us tackle multiple problems and pick which one we want to go after with a lot of information. But basically, the output of this, once you go through the entire process, is a targeting. It's targeting. You're targeting opportunity or targeting where your customers are struggling, and that's when the design thinking team can take over and iterate around concepts within that target space, as opposed to having somebody give them a solution and have them iterate looking for the problem, which is what happened a lot at T-Mobile. And I'm sure it happened in other places. So I think all in all, the two disciplines work together very well, because this isn't an implementation methodology, all right? As soon as we're doing this research, really, and opportunity targeting, we're trying to make sure we give the right information to the design teams and also to the marketing organization. So
that makes sense. That helps me see where it fits in. Okay, then my second part of my question is, so I've read the books. I've been in this kind of swimming in this space about 15 years. So the Jobs to Be Done book and Made to Stick, Design Sprint, Design Thinking, you name it. There's probably 40 books in that lineup. But when a friend of mine who's leaving a large automaker here in Detroit, and he used to lead up their innovation, he's starting an AI company. It's already up and running. But a lot of what you're describing sounds kind of similar to what they're doing. So in the regards that, but it's very specific to like DevOps and IT, where they've come up with some core jobs to be done, user personas of like, if you're going to be migrating over to a new system, or there's some key things that happen in the IT DevOps world. So he's created this large language kind of AI model that can automate a lot of those steps. And I think it's fascinating and great, but I've been pitching to him and proposing to him, read the book Jobs to Be Done, look at some key activities that are going to occur, because if you're coming in disrupting these large and medium-sized organizations with how much they can automate with AI, but the individuals that are left there don't understand how to fully leverage that tool. What course Jobs to Be Done has it now automated? And then you were also saying like what related jobs are now going to be affiliated with those new capabilities. I'm kind of rambling, but can you fish anything out of what I'm saying? Like where
I think
those teams being able to leverage this?
Whether you're a consulting firm or in industry and you have responsibility over a portfolio or innovation or whatever, you can build out a catalog of things and prioritize it so that you know what the next thing once you've kind of tackled one thing, you know where you can go to get deliver value tomorrow. So yeah, this all feeds into like strategic roadmaps. I mean, you've got to go through a process of prioritizing that, figuring out, do we have the capabilities to tackle that? That's another big piece that's really not part of Jobs to Be Done, but I started adding some components. That's that ideals thing that I had in there gets towards capabilities, but I'm just trying to tie the problem space, the true problem space. I mean, I get so much flack when I say problem space, and people that are designing solutions get on my case. I'm talking about abstracted away from any solutions, that problem space. There's problems. Yeah, I've got problems every day. So but I don't know if I pulled out what you were trying to get me to pull out, but I think there's a lot of people are interested in Jobs to Be Done in different disciplines. And I've been in the delivery side of technology, but I kind of abstracted myself away from that to learn this with the innovation mindset, not and that term is another one that's thrown around a lot, but I mean like market level innovation, business model, disruption, things like that. It's a fundamentally different thing. So, using it as a product manager is probably different than as what I would call an innovation or R&D or something like that. I don't know what the right term is. We have to make a new term up so everybody agrees. But yeah, that's happy to dive in more, but that's my quick take.
No, that was super helpful. And I think what you're saying too is like really focusing in on the innovation of the market level, business model level. This is my last thought on this, just to kind of open it back up to the floor. But I've done a lot of discovery calls with individuals throughout the globe that are looking to help their teams innovate better, or how do we, leverage the best in technology or the best in design thinking and all these principles to do the best work. And as they see the capabilities and power of AI and the automation and all the rest that's occurring, they're seeing two redesign waves. This is like, I'm using plain language, but there's the redesign of the business model and how they're approaching their market, knowing that they've got these new capabilities at hand. And then there's a redesign on an operational level of how is the internal team now going to work together. So I really think there's something interesting in the intersection of what you're doing. I just can't formally, it's in my brain. I just can't quite explain.
This something that came to my mind, and then I saw a chat that I want to address, but something that came to my mind. One of my former colleagues at Stratogen, and I still work with them occasionally, said something interesting at a workshop once, and it was like, if you're looking for a needle in a haystack, stop piling hay on the haystack. And the only thing I would add to it is that the needle may be over there in the corner, it may not even be in the haystack. So in a world where we can generate a million ideas, we can't determine which ones are valuable or if any of them are valuable. So I just keep that in mind. That's really, the power of this, whether you're looking at business model innovation or experience design. Better, how can we differentiate an experience?
Thanks for that, Kat. That was great. And Mike, I think finale, right? Elaine,
No, it's actually Thor and then finale.
Okay, Thor. Let's go over to Thoralf. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry for not putting on my camera. I'm currently roaming in my car on the German telecom network, which is the mothership of T-Mobile USA. So that's kind of funny. So that's one part of my context. The other one is Jim saw my presentation on LinkedIn. I recently talked about job to be done at scale, involving several teams at the same time to accelerate. So you can connect on LinkedIn if you'd like to see that deck. But I have two questions, and if we have time, I can ask both. The first one is fairly simple. I understood that social jobs are more than just how you want to be perceived by others. I understood that it increases your likelihood of your product or services being hired by adding value in the sense of building social relationships, etc., etc. Do you understand what I mean? So what is your take on that?
Well, Jim, I think you and I have had conversations along these lines in the past, but the way we look at it is this: a social job or an emotional job all by itself is not an innovation input. Okay, because let's just say I want to be happy or I want to be confident. You can't develop a product for that. Okay, so we always root the social or emotional jobs with that functional job. Okay, so we don't map social jobs out. We don't get metrics for the social jobs. We simply rate in the context of the core job. How important is it that you want to be happy, or how satisfied are you with your ability to be happy? That's what we pull out. And yes, it does help, I think, the marketing organization in that final mile, trying to get people to make the decision. But it's not maybe somebody can give examples of where you can embed happiness into your product, but I think a lot of people try to do that in the experience world with service design, and we're all gonna everybody smile. I don't know how effective that is, but that's kind of my take on it. I don't spend a lot of time in that social emotional space trying to theorize on it.
Understood. I asked Tony the same when he came to my meetup 2 weeks ago, and he basically said, you don't have desired outcomes, you just map it to functional job. So for my example of curating a list of songs, for example, right, and then getting recognition and sharing with others, that's, I think, what you would map to a functional job. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't go through my list of those, but I would generate those social jobs and the emotional jobs, and then in the survey, which is about the functional job, we will also ask them to rate when you're doing the functional job, or when you're trying to get the functional job done. How important is it that you what social job, or how important is it that you emotional job, stuff like that. So exactly what Tony said. I mean, I learned from Tony, so I mean, I'm not going to wander, too far from what he told you.
Great. Yeah, I agree with that though, Mike.
I'd pass on. Yeah, I'll pass on to the next question.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Thor.
Can I just answer one quick question, and then we can move on? Somebody asked whether I just asked ChatGPT to tell me what the job to be done is, or to give it instructions like that. I will tell you that the answer is no. My job map prompt is really long. Okay, it's like a medium-sized blog post, and my success metric prompt is about 13,000 characters. So I am explicit. I don't. When I did my capability modeling, I could point to the CMMI Institute, CMM Institute, CMMI, and it was able to pull the standards from that. But it's not gonna. There's too many different schools of thought on jobs to be done out there that are conflicting, and you're just not going to get a good result. So you have to be very prescriptive.
Yeah, and I recommend, if you see Evan Shore's visit here on Jobs to Be Done Untangled, he shows some of those prompts, and it's a page long. You basically have to tell ChatGPT what a success metric is, or what a context is. You have to define that. Exactly. And of course, Mike, that the chat part of ChatGPT is you go back and forth as well too. What you were trying to do is get it all in one shot, which doesn't allow you to iterate.
Very observant. Right? Yeah, very observant, because I just I won't get into this, but it gets very chatty. It's like it gets super excited. Oh, I'm going to be able to answer your question. Here's the results, and then it summarizes how great it did. And I'm like, I don't want that. So it took me quite a long time to figure out how to force it to not do that. That was annoying. That's right. I'm just outputting content. That's all I'm doing, is outputting content. I don't want to chat. So
you don't want to chat back. Right?
Like if you did this through the API, which would be the ideal way, I don't think you'd get. I don't know if you'd get that or not. I haven't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good point. The chat back. Yeah. Great. Thanks for that. Thanks for picking that question out. But now we're going to go to finale, right?
Yes. Hey, Jim. Hey,
Hi.
Mike. So I am trying to launch like a whole design strategy transformation at the bank. And part of it was I used the hell out of your book, Jim, and it's great to see AI being used, but because I work at a bank, it will never happen. ChatGPT, because of the proprietary information, they would have to build up their own AI. Far away from that. But some of the things I wanted to ask about is, since I'm solely a team of one currently, and hopefully I'm getting some help with like my product partners, but it's very disorganized, and I'm trying to just use JTBD Canvas right now on Mural to get everything all organized, because people are just going all over the place. One of the things I learned is that they don't really have a lot of research done. They want to make a lot of changes based on, say, like feedback from, say, a third party, like JD Powers. When they get feedback like that, they tend to react. But it's like we don't do our own due diligence to track our own metrics. So how do I go about trying to do a baseline? Because right now they're trying to make all these changes, then test to see which one wins. But then I'm like, okay, I guess you could do that, but what if you break something that was already working and you don't know what you broke because we don't know what was working?
So I have I don't know if two things. First is, if I were you, I would explore the OpenAI API, because you can use that and firewall your proprietary data. I don't know if that will pass muster at your bank, but that's one thing you could look at. One of the things that's very different about this type of research that I didn't, I don't have a research background. I came out of technology and delivery, and I kind of stumbled into this. So when went after strategy and I went into industry and I was in a consumer facing industry, I found out that the marketing research is so different. Market research, I call it marketing because it was very fundamentally different. They want people to answer hypothetical questions. They want people, like, for instance, would you in the next 3 months or so think about switching to a new phone, phone carrier, wireless carrier? Whereas the research we were doing was we only pulled in people that actually did. So they actually did switch so that we can, test all these needs and, experience point, whatever, throughout that journey, what got them to leave, what pulled them into the funnel, what kept them in the funnel, with people that actually did it. So that's one thing. I mean, I could go on this topic for a while, but that it's fun. We do it fundamentally differently. So we're not, the react to other research is interesting because one of the things that I did was to test. We did this one study, and I wanted to run a side test in it, and I took a bunch of products that whatever team had thrown over the fence to the consumer, which is basically the stores, and tell them to sell it. So they're taking up valuable space in the store, and they weren't producing, they were failing. And I demonstrated that if we had done this research properly 5 years ago, we would have never invested in this. So this approach is very forward looking. It's not, we don't look backwards and try to, forecast what's going to happen. We look forward. The metrics, the job, it's all objectives. And what are you trying to accomplish? Not what did you do necessarily. So very fundamentally different. And I think it lets you become a leader as opposed to a follower. So that's, and we could go on that for hours, but I mean, that's essentially what you want to do, right? You want to be a leader. You want to know what to do. And if everybody goes this way and you have your data based on this type of research says you should go this way, let them go that way. Most companies don't succeed, in the long term. They start to wind down. Every industry drives to zero eventually. So your job is to really know what to do while the industry is still thriving. And then as it starts winding down, what's the next thing that we need to do to jump onto that next wave?
Yeah, I think you validated what I was doing. I was like, okay, I can't stop the train, but what can I do on the side?
Yeah.
And
You need to kind of get ahead of the train or the next departure.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping. I'm using your tools, so I'm gonna hope for the best.
All right. Hey, you know what, Mike, we're right at the top of the hour and I want to respect people's times, which means we're not going to get to Jan's question. So we're not going to have the Jan Mike death match here, and Urko as well too. I know you've been patiently waiting as well too, but Elaine, I think we're going to try to find a way to follow up with the questions asynchronously, maybe in a blog post or something like that. Mike, if you're game, we can have Jan and Urko and anybody else. You can send us your questions and then we'll try to answer those. Is that okay? I see a thumbs up. And sorry guys about
Perfectly
that.
fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, we
And
want
I love what you're doing, Mike.
Yeah. Mike, thanks so much for sharing all this. I think it was super fascinating. And, just based on the amount of discussion and questions that we had here, I can see that people got a lot of value out of that little peek into your backstage there. I mean, I guess my big final question is, if you can do all this, then we don't even need to do it twice. Like if you and I are researching the same thing, we only need one data set, right? So we could potentially all just have a repository that we draw. Like we don't even need to do this for ourselves, even with ChatGPT, right?
Imagine a startup, or imagine a small company that would never hire consulting or gives a hoot about a data set. They don't even know what it is, but they don't know what this is. It's like they don't care about jobs to be done, outcome driven innovation or whatever. They just want to know, what do I need to do next week to compete for growth?
Right.
So they're looking for an answer. So yeah, you're right. Yeah, that single data set could inform a lot of companies. It's just going to be a different product at a different price point.
Right.
And it's going to be delivered differently.
And that's where your context and situation and price factors and all of those, you can triangulate that and come up with a different answer. But ChatGPT is going to give the same answers anyway, so I don't have to do it, and you do it, and Jan does it, and Elaine does it.
Well, people are all going to want to do it themselves for a while, I think, but at some
Yeah.
point it's all going to converge, and we'll move on to that next one.
Thinking into
Jim,
the future with you there, Mike.
Jim, I have an idea for a marketing slogan for your idea.
Yeah.
It's basically, it just says, pick your strategy based on this data set.
There you go.
Nice.
Yeah.
Elaine, anything to wrap us up here, Elaine?
I've posted 2 sets of links in the chat. The first is for our November 28th, the registration link. And then I also posted a link to Jan and the Venbridge teams. They also have an upcoming webinar on November 8th. So there's an Eventbrite link to register for that. It is free, and it looks like it is well timed for all of the time zones that are represented here, at least the Western world time zones that are represented.
All right.
So
Thanks, everybody.